Hello and welcome as we celebrate Black History Month. Thanks for joining us. I'm Keith Kuntz. This month marks a time to reflect on the past, take stock of the present, and look to the future. And the man you're about to meet is connecting that past to the present through genealogy, tracking the roots of Black Americans with untold yet just incredible stories. News 8's Sarah Cody introduces us to him.
These were heroic people of strength.
In the 1990s, John Mills of Bloomfield embarked on a quest to find out more about his ancestors, which took him to this Texas burial ground to search for the grave of his great-great-grandfather, an enslaved man who had been freed on Juneteenth.
And we had to walk past the whites-only cemetery to go into the woods to see where they were at. And that instilled a reverence in me to what the enslaved had to endure, even in visual, in life.
This experience prompted the software architect to also become a genealogist, with a mission to uncover the ancestry of other Black Americans and share their untold stories.
I learned about all these people that are considered exceptionalists. I learned about Martin Luther King and Medgar Evers and Harriet Tubman and Rosa Parks. Great people. They're the one in the million in my mind. I never heard a lot of stories, the details about the million.
He founded the Alex Brienne Corporation, named for his daughter. During research, Mills learned about the 29th Connecticut Colored Regiment, formed in 1863, which included a soldier named Daniel Stanley Lathrop, shown here in a photograph at the New Haven Museum and also on a monument in New Haven's Crisolo Park. Turns out the soldier was a descendant of a man named Primus, enslaved by the Lathrop family in Norwich.
That was just a fantastic story to me, that you have a Civil War veteran that we can trace back to enslavement.
Detailed information about Primus's life was amazingly shared in this book, written by Norwich resident Lydia Sigourney in 1824.
It's an amazing story because that doesn't exist for Black families. You don't have this sense of your history at all.
Mills is working with the Norwich Historical Society to illuminate this story during the upcoming 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. He also connected with Lathrop and Primus's descendants, who live right here in Connecticut.
I'm extremely grateful to John. What he's doing for our family and families like ours, it's necessary.
It filled me with great pride, knowing that, my ancestors helped to form this country.
And the work will continue, changing the narrative, shedding light on those in the shadows.
And so hopefully more and more stories like this will be told as time goes on.
And that is the plan. Mills is working with multiple town councils and museums to honor some of these brave figures in Connecticut's history with murals and street signs. For Honoring Black History, I'm Sarah Cody.
Now to breaking barriers. There are so many examples of Black men and women doing incredible things in our communities, like Hamden's Assistant Fire Chief, Shelley Carter. She overcame racial and gender barriers to become the first Black female chief in all of New England. As News 8's Catherine Hauser shows us, it's a career she never dreamt of.
I actually did not want to become a firefighter. It was never on the radar.
A successful career that almost never happened.
The only thing I knew was red trucks and sirens and move out the way,
But thanks to a walk with her young son past a Hartford firehouse more than 20 years ago, the future chief, Shelley Carter, was asked a question that changed her life.
The guys were on the ramp doing their truck checks. And my son went crazy. He was like, "Mommy, I want to see the fire truck." And I took him over to the fire truck. And the guys were like, "You ever thought about becoming a firefighter?" And I was like, "No, no, not for me. I'm the girliest girl I know."
That girly girl has now made history. First, as the first Black woman promoted to captain in the state of Connecticut.
As fire chief, I swear to lead.
Then in 2022, becoming the first Black female fire chief in all of New England.
Of the United States of America to the best of your ability.
Yes. And now assistant fire chief in Hamden, where a woman has never held an office position in the department.
It is my responsibility as a Black woman in this moment in history, to say, guess what? I pushed through that glass ceiling. I forced it in New England to make sure that if they choose to be whatever they choose to be, they can do it as well.
According to data from the National Fire Protection Association, 80% of firefighters nationwide are white only 6% are black.
There has to be a vision of who we are as a people to show our young folks that the battles that were fought to get us where we are, there were no black women fire chiefs that I could look up to in 1999 when I joined the fire department. I'm sure they might have been out there. I never saw them.
On your mark.
A lack of visibility, Chief Carter is fighting to change.
You can't be what you can't see, said one of my fire chief friends. You can't be what you can't see.
And while she may be the first, Carter says she will make sure she is not the last by asking other young girls that very same question that changed her life all those years ago.
There is not a day that goes by where I don't stop a young woman on the street, in the grocery store, in the mall, and go, hey, you ever thought about becoming a firefighter? That's how I started. I'm actually getting a little emotional now. Because someone just asked that question, and it changed my whole life.
Chief Carter also gives back with her Girls Future Firefighter Camp, a unique experience to give young girls a basic skill of the field and Chief Carter's signature "You Can Do This" attitude. I'm Catherine Hauser, News 8.
And while Chief Carter may be a name children read about in history books someday, right now they hear names like Frederick Douglass, Rosa Parks, Ruby Bridges, and Harriet Tubman. And a Stanford kindergarten teacher is bringing those names to life as characters in her children's book. Yvette Cole's Harriet's Dinner Party teaches the littlest learners about Black history. The story centers around a little girl named Destiny who finds herself at a dinner party at Harriet Tubman's house. Then famous Black historical figures like those we just named begin showing up. Ms. Cole sat down with our own Ann Nyberg to talk about how her book is a way to teach children and give them a role model they can relate to.
So one of the reasons that I wrote the book is because growing up, I didn't really see a lot of books with characters that looked like me. I think now it's much more different. We see a lot of books with diversity, but back then there wasn't a lot of books with characters that I could relate to. And studies show that children who see books or they see like teachers or people that look like them images, that they're more likely to be successful and more likely to have like a growth mindset and feel like they can be more than their circumstances.
And Cole says her dream is to get her book in schools all across the nation so young children understand the past and are empowered to change the future. Another name you're probably familiar with when we talk about Black history, the Amistad, the most famous ship rebellion in history with major ties to the city of New Haven. News 8's Ken Houston reports on a new exhibit on display to honor the story.
A new look at a familiar story and part of Connecticut history.
Amistad Retold centers the people who led the Amistad Revolt and their ongoing actions to determine their lives.
Amistad Retold. The updated exhibition is now open at the New Haven Museum. It tells the story of the 53 West Africans kidnapped from their homeland who lead a revolt aboard the La Amistad in 1839.
It's an important story, especially as we think about Black History Month, because we really want to see the Amistad story as a powerful moment of resistance to oppression.
Vibrant colors now greet visitors as they walk through the gallery doors. And a large-scale map shows the voyage of the rebels from capture in Sierra Leone, then Havana, Cuba, to be trafficked for slave trade, to the northward journey after their revolt. Eventually caught off Long Island, the rebels were brought to this location where this statue stands today, outside of New Haven City Hall. They spent 19 months here where local abolitionists worked to free them.
New Haven was the site of their imprisonment, but also a center for abolitionist organizing, where activists worked closely with the Amistad rebels, met with them in the New Haven jail, and organized for their legal defense and to publicize this case around the nation.
The paintings and engravings that adorn the walls in the exhibit are meant to give visitors an understanding of just how this story really involved the New Haven community, many of them made by local artists.
The exhibition also focuses on artists, New Haven artists who raised awareness about the revolt and the trials, but also Black artists, most recently over the last 100 years, who have kept the story alive.
The updates come in response to feedback from students, teachers, and other leaders, passing down the history of the most famous ship rebellion in American history to the next generation.
What we want students to see is to understand the Amistad Revolt as one of many and continual resistance to slavery, but also to see the central role of the people who led that revolt, who risked their lives to liberate themselves, but also the importance of social activism.
In New Haven, Ken Houston, News 8.
And still ahead tonight in our Black History Special, examining healthcare outcomes. We've got to look at the statistics, the research being done to help those outcomes, and the potentially added challenges when it comes to starting a family. Welcome back now to our Black History Special, and turning now to healthcare and the racial disparities many people report facing. Taking a look at the numbers, according to the Pew Research Center, overall, 18% of black adults report poor health, and black Americans have higher rates of death from cancer and higher maternal mortality rates for both women and infants. According to the Pew Research Center, a majority of black Americans say they've had at least one negative interaction with a healthcare provider, like pain not being taken seriously, being rushed through treatment, or needing to speak up to get the proper care. A disease known to cause extreme pain for patients, sickle cell disease. It primarily impacts people of color. Research is now underway at Yale, and News 8's Darren Kramer reports.
Nearly 100,000 Americans are impacted by sickle cell disease. Most are African American. Dr. Cece Calhoun, medical director of the sickle cell program at Smilo Cancer Hospital, describes how patients often suffer painful episodes in silence.
I can't see someone and know that they have sickle cell. I can't know that they're having pain.
The genetic blood disease causes red blood cells to be shaped like a crescent or sickle, preventing oxygen from getting where it needs to go.
It affects every organ in the body. Most notably, we think about debilitating pain, but sickle cell can affect the brain, the eyes, the lungs, every part of the body.
And that pain can be hard to explain to doctors.
Being an African American encountering health and healthcare, I think there is a healthcare system that's really finding its way and how to care for patients the best. And then you layer on that a genetic disorder that causes pain. You can't look at a person and say, yes, you're having pain, or no, you're having pain. You have to believe what they say, and that requires trust.
The cause of the disease was first discovered back in 1908, yet there are only still a handful of treatments. But there is new hope in gene therapy.
With gene therapy, you serve as your own donor. What happens is I would take someone's stem cells out of their blood, filter them out of their blood, and outside of their body, change them to either make a hemoglobin that doesn't sickle, or to make more fetal hemoglobin. And then I give them back to that person, effectively curing their disease.
Blood donations also remain a critical resource.
When we think about blood and blood donation, it's really important to get a diverse donor pool, because blood is our ace in the hole. When our patients are critically ill, we give them blood.
Whatever the treatment, the goal for Dr. Calhoun and her team to continue advocating for those living with the disease.
Historically, we have seen that this, population has been kind of, underlooked, or with the healthcare system or just in general. So it's important for us to advocate and make awareness. Sickle cell disease is real.
We always say that it's our goal to keep our patients healthy and safe. But the next part of that is to see them not just alive and surviving, but thriving.
I'm Darren Kramer, News 8.
Turning now to the potential challenges black Americans can face when they're trying to start a family. For those struggling with fertility, a shortage of sperm and egg donors of color can make an already difficult time even more challenging. News 8's Brittany Taylor introduced us to a mom who has been through it.
I always wanted to have children.
Tamiko Hunt, who is 49, says she turned to in vitro fertilization due to her age.
It meant more to me to make sure that my child matched as much to me as possible.
Fortunately, she didn't have many complications finding a donor.
Literally within a week, I had already selected and was able to move on. But I know that that's not easy for everyone, especially with African Americans and Latinos.
Hunt's experience certainly contradicts the IVF journey for many Black, Indigenous, and people of color families, also known as BIPOC, trying to find an egg donor. They typically have very few options. According to Egg Donor USA, just 15% of the 300 donors in its database identified as Black. A similar story for sperm donors, with just 4% of its donors Black.
It was my second cycle. It was an open donation, so I had the chance to speak with the family, and they were like, yeah, you know, like when we looked at these books, we don't see anyone who looked like us.
Brooke Jones is one of the few Black egg donors out there. She says there are a number of reasons more donors don't look like her. Among them,
there is that stigma of, like, you know, Black women not being supported, or, you know, not, you know, just trusting anybody in the healthcare field.
And that stigma has existed for generations, according to Dr. Mark Leondiris with this fertility clinic in Norwalk.
If they ask their elders or their parents about it, they're going to be like, no, they're going to take all your eggs. And there's this kind of concept that if you donate your eggs, right, then, you know, what does that do to your family tree?
Dr. Leondiris says Black women experience nearly twice the rate of infertility compared to white women, making the demand for Black donors even higher. However, he says there is a general need for more donors of all races, ethnicities, and religions.
All these kind of niches that kind of help us define who we are, it feels comfortable for them, helps them make that move from maybe not having any children to being a parent someday.
So what can be done to help more people of color become egg donors? Well, Brooke Jones, who you heard from, says the first step is awareness. She says that people should also do their own research and speak to a doctor about how they can potentially help another family in need. In New Haven, Brittany Taylor, News 8.
Just ahead right here, fighting bias in the courtroom.
I was an attorney before I was a judge, and people would strike jurors because they were Black and I was Black, thinking that somehow that Black person is going to be biased in favor of me.
An exclusive sit-down interview with Connecticut's first Black Chief Justice. Now, a one-on-one conversation with a Connecticut trailblazer, the first Black Chief Justice in state history. Richard Robinson talks about why he stepped down and where his life's work is now focused. He sat down exclusively with News 8 investigative reporter Jeff Dedarian.
Former Connecticut Supreme Court Chief Justice Richard Robinson with his late-night companion, a faithful friend. It's where Judge Robinson got lost in the music to help find his way on important cases. In his words, the law, like music, requires practice, repetition, rhythm, patterns repeating over and over.
Everything about the law is built on previous law. And so it's not that the judge goes out and starts something new. It's that you look at the law and look at precedent and you apply that precedent.
What was it that made you say you wanted to retire?
I love the job of being a judge. I absolutely love the job of being a Chief Justice. But my wife and I sat down and we decided that it was time to move on and do something else.
Robinson spent 24 years total on the bench, 6 of those as Chief Justice, becoming the state of Connecticut's first Black Chief Justice.
Tell me about the day that you were appointed Chief Justice. What do you remember most about it?
Being afraid. The judicial branch had over 3,500 people. The budget is $500 million. That's a lot of responsibility.
A responsibility he carried with pride. Today, Robinson works in a law firm focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. He now provides training here and across the country.
I was an attorney before I was a judge, and people would strike jurors because they were Black and I was Black, thinking that somehow that Black person is going to be biased in favor of me.
Implicit bias, he calls it. Bias we don't even know we have, and sometimes it shows up in unexpected places. He gave this example of his cousin, a diver, on a 4-year scholarship at college. The cousin showed up at school and then said,
"I'm the new diver." And the response was, "I didn't know Black people could swim."
A close look at crime and the courts as a whole, Robinson says, shows prison sentences for young Black men are 20% higher and longer than other people. That, he says, needs to change.
Being around the system for so long, right? You probably heard things, saw things that you knew were not right.
if a trial came out differently because of race or gender or age or wealth or something like that. That's not what our system is supposed to be about.
One of his proudest moments on the bench during COVID, things only closed down for one afternoon, and that was it. This former jurist doesn't have just a romance with guitars. Robinson rides a motorcycle and is a 4th-degree black belt. We couldn't end our story without asking this question.
The robe, where is it? Do you get to keep it?
My robe is in the closet, and I've tried to think about what I want to do with it, and I don't know yet, but it means a lot to me.
Once upon a time, Judge Robinson dreamed of guitar stardom, playing in a band. Instead, he chose another love to pursue, and Lady Justice is her name. Jeff Dedarian, News 8.
A very special honor for 14 veterans here in our state inducted into the Connecticut Veterans Hall of Fame during a ceremony in Rocky Hill, including Cicero B. Booker, Jr. of Waterbury. He served in the Marine Corps from 1955 to 1958, was honorably discharged with the rank of corporal. Then he followed in his father's footsteps, becoming a Waterbury police officer. His father was the first black officer on the force there. The two served together for 9 years.
That was remarkable, father and son, the first black father and son on the Waterbury Police Department. My father was my guidance, he was my role model, and I made some promises that I kept.
Booker Jr. served for 33 years in that department, retiring as a police lieutenant. Just ahead, as we wrap up our special, from the skies to the streets, to the very special honor for important contributors to Black history. Now to a Black History Month celebration in Middletown. Rapallo Avenue, renamed, dedicated to Prince Mortimer, an African man who was enslaved there. He was captured at the age of 6 and lived to be 110, but never saw freedom. While it is Black History Month, celebrations of Black history last throughout the year. In just a few months, on April 26th, the state will mark Tuskegee Airmen Day for America's first black military aviators, flying more than 15,000 sorties in Europe and Northern Africa during World War II. So many great and important stories to share. Thank you for being with us tonight. For News 8, I'm Keith Kuntz, and we'll see you next time.